This is Sam O'Shanker. When work's done and dusted for another day, and the sky takes on a look of smouldering grey as thirsty bloke meets thirsty bloke and the air in the bar starts to thicken with smoke, as we all sit there talking, perhaps about the match or even the latest, loveliest female catch, we think not once of the lonely roads that lie between us and our abodes, where sits a wife with a dinner grown cold. A wife who was long, long foretold that those who refuse to come to their senses will one day face the consequences. Oh, Sam, if you'd listened, if you'd used your brain, but your wife's warnings were all in vain. She told you no good ever comes of a boozer, that the drunkard always ends the loser. She told you no good would come of your drinking, that the devil finds mischief for those who go slinking from one pub to the next and coming home late. Your stomach, she said, more like a river in spate. She told her sister that your doom wasn't far off, that one night you'd probably drive the car off the road and die a drunkard in some miserable ditch where bogeyman, devil and fiend and witch would claim what's left of your sodden skin and bone before whisking you off and away to their foul, evil home. So, one night in a pub called the Keel and Anchor, there sits our hero, Mr. Sam O'Shanker, the fire roaring and blazing in the grate, lighting up the faces of Sam and his drinking mate, Bandy Billy, the cockeyed cockle seller. Sam loves the company of this old fella. The pair of them just sitting there for ages, sorting out the world whilst drinking their wages. And this night is no exception to the rule. The fire hot and cheering, the Guinness rich and cool, and Mabel, the landlady's considerable assets, growing ever more attractive with every pint that passes. A song, Sam! Give us a song, she implores. And rising to his feet amid the shouts and the roars, Sam, the barroom Sinatra, has the whole pub singing. The glasses, the walls, the rafters now ringing with cheering and clapping, voices soaring and drowning out the howl of the roaring storm gathering and growling in the trees outside. But Sam has well forgotten the long and lonely drive that awaits him when all this drunken mirth is past. Forgotten that the warmest of nights can never last. So come, as always it does, the hour of closing time, to the final echoing strains of Auld Lang Syne. Sam and Billy bid each other a faltering fun ta-ra. Oh, Bandy Billy, tonight, how lucky you are, only living down this same street and needing no more transport than your own 2 feet, while poor old Sam now faces that solitary drive along pitch black country lanes before he'll arrive home to a reception guaranteed to be ice cool 12 miles away, back in Liverpool. Liverpool, which no other town reaches, for its curly-headed women, false tans and peroxide bleaches. In company a king, but alone just a mere man, Sam stumbles to the car park and his waiting van. A lightning shaft suddenly splits the sky apart and fear folds its fingers around Sam's beating heart. Sam has never been the bravest of men, and now, alone in the dark, he's just a child again. He turns the ignition, but the engine just splutters. He tries once again as he curses and mutters beneath his breath, threatening and then pleading and then warning his van, calling it a bleeding bin on wheels, an old piece of crap, and if it doesn't behave, it'll be for the scrap. And perhaps it's just coincidence. Can an engine have ears? A van have intelligence? Who knows? But with that threat of the scrapper's yard, the ignition catches, the engine sparked, and Sam pushes the pedal hard down to the floor, and the van pulls away with a shuddering roar. The wind whistling madly as the van battles on, the rain hurtling down, the thunder rattling on, along lanes hemmed in by billowing trees, down deserted back roads the old van speeds, past Wilkes's Wood, where they found the Boy Scout with his throat ripped open and his eyes gouged out, alongside the quarry where the fishermen found the mother and her newborn babies drowned, across Finnegan's Bridge where pickled Father McBain toppled over the wall and never preached again. For Sam, every lay-by, each junction and bend seems to mark the spot of some gruesome end. And with every blinding lightning flash, the countryside becomes awash with a whiteness stark and evil. Sam speeds through it all, poor devil. When ancient Knowsley village comes into sight, Sam, instead of turning the wheel right, turns it left, lest the police should put the flag up and make him blow their little bag up. Sam's drunk so much that well he knows one single breath would make it decompose. So to the left he turns the wheel, as up ahead the church bells begin to peal. Midnight, the time of all things dark and bad. Oh, Sam, poor Sam, you luckless, gutless lad. As the van turns down the side of Old Knowsley Church, the battered, weary vehicle gives a sudden, consumptive lurch. He falters and splutters and slows to a crawl before coming to rest alongside the church wall. Sam shakes his weary, bleary, drunken head. The engine is hopelessly, helplessly dead. He turns the ignition, but each time it's in vain, and outside the lashing rods of rain threaten a soaking for any would-be mechanic. Sam finds himself now starting to panic. How can he fix it? He's no engineer. His only flair is for whiskey, wine and beer. With a muttering curse, he climbs out of his seat, gets out of the van, and suddenly feels sulphurous heat, sees a light that glimmers in the graveyard's gloom, then shadowy figures emerging tomb from tomb, shifting and swaying, a dance going on. Witches, goblins, ghouls, vampire, demon, all thrashing and writhing at some hellish grave, prancing and dancing from grave to gaping grave. Sam stands dumbstruck, mesmerized, unable to turn away his gawping eyes. For witches like these he's never ever seen in any fairy tale story or childlike dream. This is no ugly, bedraggled, haggard band. These witches, no hideous, odious harridans. These are lithesome beauties, supple and slim, their bodies glistening and beguiling him as they dance throbbed together with brazen and bold, no sickly waltz or quick step strict and cold, but an urgent, quivering rhythmic flow rippled each muscle from each head to each toe. And there, in the center of that throbbing throng, was the devil himself, head thrown back in song, his cloves carving screams from a black guitar, splintering notes like a wrecking bar, splaying shards of a satanic tune upon the dancers. The urgent, reckless, writhing prancers, their hips like springs suddenly uncoiling, the atmosphere fizzing, spitting, bubbling, boiling. Sam's gaping gaze feasted at random until one dancer, even more full of abandon than the rest of her sisterly coven, came into view. Oh, Sam, was there ever a bigger fool than you? On this shimmering young witch, Sam glued his eyes as to his delight and excited surprise she started to throw off her sweat-soaked clothes. And oh, now how Sam's blood pressure rose. Drape after drape she provocatively peeled, with every layer more and more revealed for any ogling, goggling eyes to see. Her only remaining claim to modesty, the bra and pants she seemed reluctant to lose. Poor Sam. Frustration, perhaps, or merely the booze. Something now robbed him of what was left of his senses, and deaf to all sorts of possible consequences, his voice rings out in a bellowing howl, "Get the rest off, love, you can't stop now!" In an instant, all light is suddenly gone, but every evil eye is fixed and turned upon the meddlesome intruder, that little man who scrambles now, trying to get to his van, but recalling with a rising sense of dread that the bloody engine is completely dead. Dead, the word echoes through Sam's brain. He turns the ignition again and again and again as the hellish legion, witches, devil, and ghoul swarms in pursuit of the meddlesome fool. Sam prays, pleads, promises, begs his van to start, and is as if possessed of human heart. She finally responds, and Sam puts her in gear, begins to pull away, although still sick with fear because the ghoulish throng, shrieking and baying, is following the van. Sam frantically weighing how he might even now be able to find some way of leaving that hideous horde behind. And then he remembers the cockle seller's submission, the one that Sam had mocked as stupid superstition, that assertion that no otherworldly fiends dare cross a river or any running stream. What once spawned Sam's mockery now sires belief. And feeling the first rush of blessed relief, he remembers that place where, as a young colt, he used to jam jar for sticklebacks on the banks of the Alt. Now the Alt, say some, is less a river and more a dribble. But in Sam's situation, who's going to quibble? If its Tesco trolley-blighted trickle can ward off the clamouring, babbling, advancing horde, then the River Alt is his chosen destination. That piddling stream, his one chance of salvation. As Sam pulls out onto Knowsley Lane, he glances in his mirror and sees again through the lightning's flash his ghoulish pursuers, that putrefied mire washed up from hell's sewers, some of them running, some half flying, and every one of them cackling, baying, and crying, "Meddling fool, you could never be saved. Come back with us to the grave." Sam resolves not to turn his head and to keep his eyes fixed on the road ahead, urging the van to buck up and rise to the situation, to give him more speed, more acceleration. But though Sam's foot is pressed flat iron to the floor, the weary, worn-out van can barely do more than anything beyond 30 miles an hour. Her days of speed and strength and power all behind her now. No longer sporty, nimble or nifty. No more cruising bends at a nonchalant 50. No more turbocharged acceleration and the power to get out of a difficult situation. These days she's more akin to a snail or some poor fishing smack that fights the gale. Sam's van knows all that's left now is the reckoning, and that Otterspool Tip is already beckoning. But even though she knows this trip is the end, she still thinks of Sam, her driver, owner, friend, and determined now, just this one last time, to deliver him as she's always done in her prime. She summons from the depths of her ramshackled frame a final surge of strength, a last burst of smoke and flame spitting from her exhaust as she triumphs once more, speeding away and leaving behind the putrid core of followers, and off towards the altar she tears, faster now than she's gone for years. Up in her cab, Sam Holland whoops and cheers, convinced now that salvation beckons. Oh, what a fool is the fool who never reckons with the guile of the ghoulish, the determination of beasts who are bent on denying salvation. Round the bend, the bridge looms into sight. Sam punches the air, tells himself now he'll be all right. Only as he does so, he happens to glance in his rearview mirror and almost fills his pants. Coming up fast in the outside lane is a sleek and sporty black Ferrari FT40. In a flash, it's so close, Sam can see its bonnet, and his own half-clad witch now stood upon it, and behind the wheel who should be steering but the devil himself, horn blasting and jeering as he eats up the road, and now gets so near that Sam screams out aloud in fear, the fiendish Ferrari relentlessly gaining, until with only yards to the bridge remaining, the old van's last efforts finally take their toll, leaving her able to do little more than to shake and roll. Whatever reserves she's had, she's now spent them, left with nothing but the last scraps of her forward momentum to carry her to the bridge that crosses the stream, where suddenly the devil's laughter turns to a scream as he and his half-clad satanic daughter realize that the van is about to cross water, that it's gaining the bridge, is almost upon it, when screaming, the witch leaps from the bonnet and seizing the van's back bumper, she strains, eye-popping, cursing, and swollen-veined in her struggle to bring the vehicle to a halt and stop Sam and his van from crossing the alt. And well she may have achieved her intention, had Sam ever been one to pay any attention to basic maintenance of his poor old van. But we know Sam was never that sort of man, which is why, as the witch waged her tug of war, the bumpers, corroded rivets, those that never saw oil or grease, rusted, encrusted threads all gone, started to snap off, to shear off one by one. The bumper ripped free as the rivets give way. The witch spitting curses as the van rolls away across the bridge in triumph to trump her, left holding nothing but the battered old bumper as Sam is carried safely beyond the running water, safe now from the clutches of the devil's daughter. Now any man too fond of the ale, let him hear Sam O'Shanker's tale, and spare perhaps a thought for a van that deserved to be driven by a better man. The kind of man that I know you would hate to unwittingly come to emulate. So if your wife declares you've had enough, just kiss her and thank her, and remember the tale of Sam O'Shanker.